everybody, this is Lori Nielsen. Welcome. I'm going to introduce you to my unit called Spreadsheets in Kindergarten. In my classroom, I want to use technology when it would be the best mode for having students make meaningful learning from their experiences. Sometimes technology allows us to go beyond what any other tool would be capable of. One way that I would like to use technology in my classroom, specifically in mathematics, is in gathering, evaluating, and using information. I would like to have my students learn to collect data, create graphs, and learn to interpret them using spreadsheets. Currently, we do this process in an archaic mode, pencil and paper, and the process is slow and painful. I have a few goals in changing the tool. First of all, motivation. Every 5-year-old loves to use technology. Second, expediting the process. Third, enhancing students' learning through technology use. And fourth, giving kindergartners exposure to utilizing technology as a tool for life. This precise use of technology is directly correlated with NETS Standard 3, Research and Information Fluency. Students apply digital tools to use, gather, evaluate, and use information. Also, we will address Standard 6, Technology Operations and Concepts. Students demonstrate a sound understanding of technology concepts, systems, and operations. With this all in mind, my goal was to create a unit that students collect data, evaluate, and use information using technology. In the book by Hallen, Johansson, and Mara, they explain that technologies should be used as engagers and facilitators of thinking. The plan was to have technologies, or to use spreadsheets to be the vehicle in which they would go through the process of research and information. Also, I'd like to link the unit to a theme we do earlier in the school year called All About Me. Early connections suggested that for technology to be beneficial, it should be directly linked to class curriculum and real-life situations. In the unit, students will collect data on classmates, learn to interpret the data in a bar graph, and make a factual statement about the data in the graphs. I'd like to go through the unit in the same way that we did in the class, going through each of the stages. So in stage 1, I have here the results that I would like my children to be able to do by the time we're done with the unit. Students will be able to independently use their learning to come up with a question they want to collect data on, collect, represent through graphs, and interpret data, use newly learned information to create a new question. I would like my students to understand that data can be collected regarding any number of topics, that graphs can be made to represent data collected, and that graphs can be used to analyze the original study question and make further inferences and questions. Each of the essential questions you see on the right would be questions I would ask my students during this unit. So the first day when we read through the book, I would be asking them, so how could we collect data, and do you have ideas of what would be a good way to do that? And then I would lead them into discussion on each of these questions throughout the unit. Some of the skills that they would acquire would be being able to ask questions. Though this seems like a silly thing for kindergartners, that is actually quite a challenge to learn how to ask a question. So one of them would be how to ask a question to collect data on, how to collect data, and then they would also learn how to collect data using apples, numbers, actually any spreadsheet we'll be using, how to make graphs on any spreadsheet, how to interpret a graph and make deductions from it, and how to ask further questions given the newly learned information. Alright, the next stage, stage 2, was the evidence. And in this, I broke it into 2 basic sections. There's the performance task, which I'm going to plan to use a checklist because that's easy for me. I use a clipboard and I just have each child's name on the clipboard, and it's easy to write a number, or in this case I'm writing yes, no, or NH, meaning needing help. So each student will be graded on whether they can accomplish each of these tasks to generate a question to collect data on at least 10 people, which I'll probably be pretty flexible on that one given how many students they can get to, and you'll see that in my lesson plans, just the structure of how I set up the classroom. The third thing, enter data in spreadsheets. Fourth, make a graph from the data. 5, analyze and give 2 facts about the data. And last, generate a new question regarding the data. And then the other 2 ways of assessing that I'd like to do is a self-assessment, and you'll see that in the lesson plans where I have them doing cooperative structures where they'll be doing a timed pair share, having to think about what they learned, what went well, what didn't go well, and then share it to a partner. And then each of those partners will have, well, some of those partners will have time to share out in the whole class. And then I will also be doing a teacher observation rubric, and that is listed down here below. So I have my assessment rubric here, students, data question, data interpretations and extensions, and you can see the different levels that I would rate them. And then students use the spreadsheet. And again, this is one of those clipboard type things, quick and easy for me, and doesn't take much time. So on to stage 3, the learning plan. I have approximately 3 days for this unit, but that probably will be stretched out a lot longer than that, given that I will be having lots of patience with kindergartners. So the first thing we'll do is establish the goals. I usually will post those on the board and so that I can refer back to them every day that we are using this unit, and I'll be highlighting the one that we'll be addressing that day. Then we'll do a think, pair, share, which is a Kagan cooperative structure. So they'll be thinking about some ideas of questions they might have, and then pairing and sharing. And this will give them some flexibility of learning what types of questions are appropriate and how we can be collecting data on those. And then we'll start a story called The Great Graph Contest by Lorene Leedy. And this is an awesome book for, I would say you could use it all the way up through 5th, 6th grade at all different levels. But it's really great. So I have this book all the way through the unit. Each day I read it and I pick out something new that we're going to be talking about. So in the first day, we're going to discuss types of questions that you can collect data on, and ones that you wouldn't maybe be able to collect data on. And there's a number of different scenarios and types of things that they collect data on throughout the book that you can help bring up the questions that, oh, this would make a good question to collect data on. After that discussion, we'll do another think, pair, share, or time, pair, share, and students will have time to, we'll be doing a rally robin and brainstorming ideas of questions that they can come up with. So a rally robin is just a back and forth with a partner of, ooh, this would be a good question, and then one person would share and then the other person would share, and they'd go back and forth coming up with questions. Then after the rally robin, we would write some ideas for the whole class to refer to. And the last part of that day would be to check off on the checklist which students were able to generate questions and which ones still need some more help. Alright, so the second day and third day are the bigger ones that take a lot more patience. Those are going to be the days that we're actually working on the spreadsheets. So in day 2, we're going to review the goals, discuss which goal is going to be the main highlight of the day. Today it's going to be entering the data into spreadsheets. So I'd start off talking about the goal and then read the Great Graphing Contest again, and this time we're going to discuss the way the characters collect the data. And there's lots of different ways that they collect data, using tallies, using numbers, piling cookies on different plates and all different things. So we're going to discuss how the variety of items being counted went into different columns or rows, and I'll be showing them spreadsheets at that point. As a whole class, we'll practice a question, enter some data, let each of the kids come up and practice entering in the data in columns and rows, and then have students go into math stations after that. And what I do at math stations is I have 6 different tables. Each table is doing something different, and one of those stations would be the spreadsheet station. That way I could work with 4 students on the spreadsheets at a time, and we would do 2 to 3 stations a day. So I'd work with 2 to 3 groups, and that would be a few days till I could get through the whole class. Each of these days, we would be reviewing the process and discussing, collecting data, what went well, what didn't go well, and we'd be doing a time pair share. And I would also do that for the other tables at different stations, asking them the same thing. That way, everyone is participating in that time pair share, but they're not necessarily talking about the same activity. And then, again, the last thing I would be doing is checking off students on the checklist. The final day, day 3, we would go over the goals, and today we would be making graphs using spreadsheets, answering questions based on our graphs, and asking new questions based on our answers to our first question. So again, I'd be reading the Great Graphing Contest, only today we'd be discussing the different types of graphs used to display the data collection. After the story, we would again open up a spreadsheet, use the same questions from yesterday, and walk through the steps of making graphs. And I would have each student come up and help have a chance doing that. And then again, I'd break groups into stations and have one of the stations be the graphing station today. So in ending this unit, we would come back together as a whole group and discuss each group's question and graph, and then have them answer questions regarding each of the team's graphs. And we would follow up with coming up with new questions that we could ask based on what our data and graphs show. So this concludes my unit on spreadsheets. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Thanks.